Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to a series of videos in which I am reading you a book. We are reading the Gospel according to St. Mark from the King James Bible. This is the Norton Critical Edition, Volume 2. And we are reading the Gospel and also chatting about it a bit, which is lots and lots of fun. We're chatting about it as if we were doing a normal read-aloud of a normal book. We're trying to ignore the fact that these are the foundational documents of the most powerful religion in the history of the world. That may have had its fingers, its coercive and doctrinal fingers, in your heart and soul from your earliest memories. We're going to try to ignore that and just look at what we're getting on the text, a little of what we're getting on the text. Like I said before, this is not biblical history, this is not biblical analysis, this is not exegesis of any kind. This is just a little bit of what we're reading. That's all. Just to know it, just to know what we're reading, what the actual documents are, in the King James anyway. So we are up to Chapter 6, which is a big one. So I'm going to try to keep my interruptions to a minimum. And the he here is Jesus, of course. And he went out from thence and came into his own country, and his disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath day was come, and he began to teach in the synagogue, and many hearing him were astonished, saying, From whence hath this man these things? And what wisdom is this which is given unto him, that even such mighty works are wrought by his hands? Is it not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James, and Joseph, and Judah, and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? And they were offended at him. But Jesus said unto them, A prophet is not without honor, but in his own country, and among his own kin, and in his own house. And he could there do no mighty work, save that he laid his hands upon a few sick folk, and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. Okay, so the people who know him don't trust him. They say, you have your family, your sisters are here in the synagogue right now. Aren't you a normal person? Don't we remember you as being a normal person? Now you're claiming to be some sort of religious leader? That's interesting. And also the way that it's phrased here is almost as if their lack of belief prevents him from doing any miracles, aside from a few healings here and there. I'd love to know those sisters' names. Imagine being Jesus' sister. And he went round about the villages teaching. What are you teaching, Mark? It would be wonderful if you could tell us what he's teaching. And he called unto him the 12, and began to send them forth by 2 and 2, and gave them power over unclean spirits, and commanded them that they should take nothing for their journey, save a staff only, no scrip, no bread, no money in their purse, but be shod with sandals, and not put on 2 coats. And he said unto them, In what place soever ye enter into an house, there abide till ye depart from that place. And whosoever shall not receive you, nor hear you, when ye depart thence, shake off the dust under your feet for a testimony against them. Verily I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. And they went out and preached that men should repent. And they cast out many devils, and anointed with oil many that were sick, and healed them. Okay, so 2 major things here to pay attention to. The 2 major things. One is something we barely got a hint of before, which is, what is this message? What are these people preaching? They're preaching the repenting of sins. So John's doctrine, the doctrine that we saw from the religious leader at the beginning of this gospel, repent your sins. Okay, doesn't seem all that revolutionary. We've been told a couple of times now that it feels revolutionary when people hear it from Jesus, but that's normal. And also one other huge thing, which is that Jesus' power that we've seen many times to cast out unclean spirits, to control devils, they beg him for mercy. That power is transferable. That superpower is transferable. He can give it to his disciples. And King Herod heard of him, for his name was spread abroad. And he said that John the Baptist was risen from the dead, and therefore might do works to show forth themselves in him. Others said that he is Elias, and others said that it is a prophet, or as one of the prophets. But when Herod heard thereof, he said, It is John, whom I beheaded. He is risen from the dead. And this is news to you, this is news to the reader, so Mark indulges in a long backstory here, a long flashback. For Herod himself had sent forth and laid hold upon John, and bound him in prison for Herodias' sake, his brother Philip's wife, for he had married her. And John had said unto Herod, It is not lawful for thee to have thy brother's wife. Therefore Herodias had quarreled against him, and would have killed him, but she could not. For Herod feared John, knowing that he was a just man and holy, and observed him, And when he heard him, he did many things, and heard him gladly. And when a convenient day was come, that Herod on his birthday made a supper to his lords, high captains, and chief estates of Galilee, and when the daughter of the said Herodias came in, and danced, and pleased Herod, and them that sat with him, the king said unto the damsel, Ask of me whatsoever thou wilt, and I will give it to thee. And he sware unto her, Whatsoever thou shalt ask of me, I will give thee, even unto the half of my kingdom. Perhaps he's drunk? I don't know. And this is the famous Salome. She's not named here, but that's who this is. And she went forth and said unto her mother, What shall I ask? And she said, The head of John the Baptist. And she came in straightway with haste unto the king, and asked, saying, I will that thou give me by and by in a charger, that is, on a plate, the head of John the Baptist. And the king was exceedingly sorry, yet for his oath's sake, and for his sake, their sakes which sat with him, he would not reject her. And immediately the king sent an executioner, and commanded his head to be brought. And he went and beheaded him in the prison, and brought his head in the charger, and gave it to the damsel, and the damsel gave it to her mother. And when his disciples heard of it, they came and took up his corpse, and laid it in a tomb. So lots of antecedent problems there. Mark has a problem with antecedents, or his translators in the King James era do, because the antecedents of those he's are all over the map, but you get the impression. Herod makes an official oath. He swears in front of everyone, in front of the people he cannot be seen to forswear in front of them, that he'll give this dancing girl, whatever she wants. And her mother wants her enemy beheaded. And it happens right there. The head is brought back on a server in front of the dinner guests. So John the Baptist, the guy that we started this chapter with, this gospel with, is now dead. And his followers, interesting to note that he still has followers, separate from Jesus, bury his body. How they get it out of the dungeon, I don't know. Fascinating to think about. Herod doesn't hate John. He thinks he's interesting. He thinks he's a just man. So, did he visit John? When John was in prison, did he stand there outside the bars and talk with John? Fascinating to think about. But we're not nearly done. This is a long chapter. And the apostles gathered themselves together unto Jesus, and told him all things, but what they had done and what they had taught. And he said unto them, Come ye yourselves apart into a desert place, and rest a while. For there were many coming and going, and they had no leisure so much as to eat. And they departed into the desert place by ship, privately. And the people saw them departing, and many knew him, and ran afoot thither out of all cities, and outwent them, and came together unto him. He can't escape these crowds, and he wants to. And Jesus, when he came out, saw much people, and was moved with compassion toward them. Second time we've heard of him being moved with compassion. Because they were as sheep, not having a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. Care to tell us what those things are? No. And when the day was now far spent, his disciples came unto him and said, This is a desert place, and now the time is far past. Send them away, that they may go into the country around about, and into the villages, and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat. And he answered and said unto them, Give ye them to eat. And they say unto him, Shall we go and buy 200 pennyworth of bread, and give them to eat? He saith unto them, How many loaves have ye? Go and see. And when they knew, they say, 5, and 2 fishes. And he commanded them to make all sit down by companies upon the green grass. And they sat down in ranks, by hundreds, and by 50s. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, he looked up to heaven, and blessed, and brake the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fishes divided he among them all. And they all did eat, and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of the fragments, and of the fishes. And they that did eat of the loaves were about 5,000 men. So a prodigious miracle that we're never actually told. Mark doesn't go into details about how it happened, what people actually saw happen. This isn't a case of a shoal of fish under the water that you don't see. This is something that the disciples would have watched happen. And straightway he constrained his disciples to get into the ship and go to the other side before unto Bethsaida, where he sent away the people. And when he had sent them away, he departed into a mountain to pray. And when even was come, and the ship was in the midst of the sea, and he alone on the land. And he saw them toiling and rowing, for the wind was contrary unto them. And about the 4th watch of the night he cometh unto them, walking upon the sea, and would have passed by them. But when they saw him walking upon the sea, they supposed it to have been a spirit, and cried out, for they all saw him, and were troubled. And immediately he talked with them, and saith unto them, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And he went up unto them into the ship, and the wind ceased. And they were sore amazed in themselves beyond measure, and wondered, for they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. And when they had passed over, they came into the land of Gennesaret, and drew to the shore. And when they were come out of the ship, straightway they knew him, and ran through the whole region about, and began to carry about in beds those that were sick, and where they heard he was. And whithersoever he entered into a village or cities or the country, they laid the sick in the streets, and besought him that they might touch, if it were but the border of his garment. As many as touched him were made whole. Okay, so that is the next chapter. That is chapter 6, and we got quite a few things to talk about. How I wish we could all just get here together for wine and calzones and do it just Bible study together. So much fun. I've proctored so many Bible studies in my time. It's so much fun to do. And once you get people past the hurdle that we are thankfully now past, actually wasn't much trouble, which is, I'm very grateful. Once you're past the hurdle of significance with a capital S, once you're just reading this, then it's so much fun to do. And in those previous Bible studies, those people also got my point, which is that does not impinge on your faith at all. It shouldn't impinge on your faith. As nonsensical as that would be to the non-faithful. But a number of things to look at here. We'll just look at a couple. One is this theme that is now ever present in every chapter of Mark, which is that not only is Jesus surrounded by huge crowds of people wherever he goes, but he doesn't like it. He's forever trying to get away from them, getting into a ship so that he can pull off from shore and have a little room to himself instead of people crowding all around him. You see, this is the second or third time that it's been mentioned that people don't just crowd around him, they also grab at him. They think, much like the woman who was afflicted with bleeding, they think that merely touching him will be good enough. So it's no wonder that he wants to get away from these pressing crowds once in a while. So that is really interesting. But there are 2 points about that final bit that I want to bring up. One is when the disciples see Jesus walking on the water towards them in the midst of a storm, it looks like he's not walking to them. It looks like he's going to ignore them. What's that all about? Did that strike you? Did that jump out at you? And also, what was that line about how even though they've just seen this prodigious miracle of the loaves and the fishes, and even though they already saw this character calm the winds and calm a storm, they're still amazed when they see him walking on water. What is that? When this text tells us their hearts were hardened, what can that possibly mean? That is obviously meant, at least by the translators of the King James, to echo Pharaoh, whose heart was hardened when Moses kept telling him, let my people go. Well, Pharaoh's heart was hardened by God in order to facilitate the full display of his might and his wrath. And if that's true here, then what are we dealing with? Either way you cut it, what are we dealing with? Either their hearts were hardened by a supernatural entity of some kind or other. A normal person, seeing what they've seen, would now be convinced that at the very least that Jesus can do miracles, that he has superpowers. They aren't convinced of that. They're constantly amazed. And now we're told that one of the reasons why is that their hearts are hardened. Well, what hardened their hearts? It isn't their visual experience. It isn't them hardening their hearts. So what is it? If it's God, then what are we reading here? Is God working at counter purposes to the mission of his own son when he's already told us to listen to him? And if it's not God, then it's Satan. Is Satan hardening their hearts? Certainly there are mentions like that all throughout the Gospels. Is Satan doing this? And if so, Jesus is allowing it when he has complete control over what these evil demons do and don't do? That mention throws me every time. And I wonder if it stuck out to you. What is this that we're watching? Either this is a group of simple people learning to follow the Messiah, learning to follow a charismatic religious figure, or it's a supernatural puppet show, and the people don't matter at all. We know for a fact, Mark has already told us that these disciples were willing to leave their homes, willing to leave their businesses, their families, their wives, their mothers-in-law. Maybe that's not much of a sacrifice, but the rest of them, they were willing to leave all of that instantly to follow this guy. So it seems unlikely to me that the text is trying to indicate that their own hearts hardened naturally. So what is going on here? Why is it that the disciples are as dumb as a bag of rocks? Why is that? Why is it that they constantly need reassurance or to be upbraided by Jesus? Where is your faith? Ye of little faith. Why is that? I find it interesting. Anyway, but there we have the gist of this chapter. A couple of major things stick out. One is that the crowds are still hounding Jesus. They're getting bigger. They're getting harder and harder to manage. And he's not helping anything by feeding them. And the other thing, another note that really sticks out in this chapter is that when Jesus goes to his own hometown, where his own family is, they don't like him. And they don't trust him. They drive him forth. And it pretty clearly, by implication, they drive him forth. And it doesn't seem like he can do much in their presence in the way of wonders or miracles. Very interesting. Very interesting stuff. So we're just gonna plow on. We'll go to the next chapter next time, and I will see you all then. Thank you, BookTube.